The day I returned to Millfield was the day my family learned who really owned their fate. 6 years earlier, I'd walked away from my father's sneers with nothing but a duffel bag and $200. Now I was back, sitting in the wood-paneled conference room of Sinclair Bank, watching through the glass as they filed in, my father's shoulders stiff with pride, my brothers exchanging confused glances, my sister clutching her purse like it might shield her. They had no idea why they'd been summoned. They had no idea I was there. "Mr. Jenkins, we're ready for you," said the assistant, and I adjusted my suit jacket as I stood. The weight of the fountain pen in my pocket, a gift from old man Sinclair himself, felt like justice. 6 years of humiliation and rejection had led to this moment. 6 years since they'd laughed at my ridiculous dreams, since my father had thrown my college acceptance letter into the fireplace and told me I'd never amount to anything more than another factory grunt like him. 6 years since I'd proven him wrong in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. They called me the failure, the disappointment, the family embarrassment. But as I walked into that room to face them, I knew one thing they didn't. I now controlled the bank that held the mortgage on everything they owned. Growing up in Millfield, Pennsylvania meant living in the shadow of the steel mill that employed half the town, including 3 generations of Jenkins men. My grandfather worked there until his lungs gave out. My father rose to floor supervisor, his highest achievement and the yardstick by which he measured everyone else's worth. "The Jenkins men build things with their hands," he'd say, flexing his calloused fingers at dinner. "We don't waste time with books and daydreams." My brothers, Scott and Dale, nodded along, already apprenticing at the mill by senior year of high school. They were carbon copies of our father, broad-shouldered, narrow-minded, and absolutely certain about their place in the world. My mother had died when I was 8. What remained was my sister Rebecca, 2 years older and the only one who occasionally stood up for me. "Leave Michael alone," she'd say when the teasing got too harsh. But even her protection came with conditions. In public, she maintained her distance from her weird little brother. I wasn't built like them. Where they were sturdy, I was slim. While they talked sports and cars, I read books hidden under my mattress. When I received a scholarship to Penn State for engineering, I thought my father might finally see my value. Instead came the most searing memory of my youth, my 17th birthday dinner at Dinelli's restaurant, the only fancy place in town. I'd saved the acceptance letter for that moment, imagining, foolishly, that they might celebrate. "I got in," I announced, sliding the envelope across the table. "Full scholarship." My father barely glanced at it. "College," he scoffed, cutting into his steak. "What for?" "Engineering. I could design systems for manufacturing, maybe even improve. You think you're too good for honest work." He looked at my brothers. "You hear this? Your brother thinks he's special." The laughter started with Scott. "Engineers," he mocked. "Guys with clipboards telling real men what to do. Remember when he tried playing football?" Dale added, "Knocked over by a strong breeze." My father drained his beer. "No son of mine is wasting 4 years playing student with my money." "It's a scholarship," I said quietly. "It wouldn't cost you anything. Nothing except your contribution to this family." He slapped the table. "Jenkins men work. Period." Later that night, he threw my acceptance letter into the fireplace while my brothers watched. "This family stuck together during the layoffs," he said. "Your grandfather didn't abandon ship when times got tough. Neither will you." I left 3 weeks later, the night of my high school graduation. Rebecca found me packing. She slipped me $200, all she had saved, and whispered, "Just go." My grand gesture of defiance was met with indifference. No one came looking. No one called. It was as if they'd expected me to disappear. What they didn't know was that 2 days before leaving, I'd met Walter Sinclair, the elderly owner of Millfield's only bank. I'd helped him change a flat tire on a rainy afternoon, refusing payment. Instead, he'd given me his business card. "If you ever need anything, son," he'd said, studying me closely. "Anything at all." I called him from a gas station 3 towns away, shivering in the rain. "Mr. Sinclair? It's Michael Jenkins. I need a job." That call changed everything. What the Jenkins family never knew, the secret I carried for 6 years, was how quickly I became indispensable to Walter Sinclair. The childless banker saw something in me that my own family hadn't: potential. Within 4 years, working nights while attending business classes, I became his protege. When his health failed 2 years later, he made a decision that stunned the board. He named me his successor. "Your family's loan comes up for renewal next month," he told me from his hospital bed. "Thought you might want to handle that personally." I never told him the full story of why I'd left home. Some humiliations run too deep for sharing. So where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments. I wonder how many of you have Millfields of your own you've had to escape. The Jenkins family reunion happened every July 4th at Lake Cresswell, a tradition as predictable as my father's disapproval. I hadn't attended in 6 years, but this year was different. This year, I had received an actual invitation, not from my father, of course, but from Rebecca. "Dad's getting some award from the mill," she'd written. 40 years of service. Everyone will be there. Maybe it's time. I knew what she didn't. Millfield Steel was teetering on bankruptcy, and Sinclair Bank held notes not just on my family's homes but on the mill itself. The award was a gold watch and a handshake before the coming layoffs. My father would be obsolete within months. Still, I RSVP'd yes. Not for reconciliation, but for resolution. I arrived at Lake Cresswell in Walter's restored 1967 Cadillac DeVille. Too flashy for an old man like me, he'd insisted when leaving it to me. The parking area was filled with familiar trucks and sensible sedans. American-made, like my father always insisted. The Cadillac stood out like a diamond in coal. The pavilion buzzed with Jenkins' relatives, neighbors, and mill workers. Red, white, and blue bunting hung from rafters. Children chased each other with sparklers while adults clutched beer cans and paper plates loaded with barbecue. My entrance created a ripple of whispers. Aunt Martha dropped her fork. Cousin Jimmy's wife elbowed him hard. Rebecca spotted me first, her face lighting up before darkening with concern at my attire, a tailored navy suit instead of the expected jeans and t-shirt. "Michael!" She rushed over. "You came." Her hug felt genuine, but tense. "You look different." "Good different or bad different?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Just not Jenkins different," she whispered, glancing around. "Dad's over by the grill." He hadn't changed, still barrel-chested, hair now steel gray instead of brown, permanent scowl etched deeper. He was holding court, gesturing with tongs while younger men nodded deferentially. "Look who showed up," Rebecca announced, pushing me forward slightly. My father's eyes flicked over me, pausing at my polished shoes. "So the prodigal returns." He turned back to the grill. "Grab a plate if you want. Food's almost ready." No hug. No questions about where I'd been. Just conditional access to communal food. "Nice to see you too, Dad." Scott and Dale materialized, both heavier, both sporting the same steel mill caps and suspicious looks. "College boy's back," Scott said, beer sloshing as he clapped my shoulder too hard. "What happened?" "They run out of books to read." Dale snorted. "Nah, he probably heard Dad's getting that watch. Gold, right? Figured there might be something in it for him." The familiar dynamic reasserted itself instantly. I was 15 again, the outsider, the disappointment. Only now, I knew something they didn't. Throughout dinner, the provocations continued. My father announced to the gathering, "My son Michael's visiting. Some of you might not recognize him without his head in a book." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "What are you doing these days, Mickey?" Dale asked loudly. "Something with computers?" Rebecca mentioned something fancy. Before I could answer, my father cut in. "Whatever it is, I hope it pays enough for that suit. Must have cost more than a week at the mill." "I work in finance," I said simply. "Finance," my father repeated as if the word tasted bad. "Pushing papers for people who actually make things, huh?" More laughter. I noticed Rebecca staring at her plate. The mill's current manager, Bill Hargrove, arrived late, looking harried. He pulled my father aside for a private conversation that left both men grim-faced. I knew what they were discussing. The bank board had voted yesterday on the mill's loan extension request. My father returned to the table distracted, missing the usual spark in his eyes when he collected his 40-year service plaque and gold watch. To Fred Jenkins, Bill announced, whose dedication to Millfield Steel is unmatched. The applause seemed hollow, as if everyone sensed something was wrong. As storm clouds gathered on the horizon, matching the tension in the air, my phone vibrated. Walter's lawyer, confirming what I already knew, the mill's extension had been officially denied. Foreclosure proceedings would begin next week. My father stood to give his acceptance speech. The same moment thunder cracked overhead and the first heavy raindrops fell. People scrambled for cover as the summer storm intensified, crowding into the pavilion. In the chaos, my father's watch, his symbol of achievement, slipped from its box and fell into a puddle. I retrieved it, wiping it clean with my handkerchief. Still trying to impress everyone with your good manners? My father sneered, snatching it back. Something in me snapped. No, Dad. Just basic decency. Something you might have taught me if you hadn't been so busy teaching me I was worthless. The crowd around us grew quiet. The rain pounded on the pavilion roof. Don't start with that again, he warned. Not today. When then? Another 6 years? When the mill closes? When you lose your house? His face reddened. What are you talking about? The mill's loans weren't extended, I said quietly. Sinclair Bank is foreclosing. How would you know that? Bill Hargrove pushed forward through the crowd. I reached for my wallet and removed a business card. Because I'm the one who made the decision. If you're enjoying this journey of revenge and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Help us reach that 1,000 subscriber mark so we can bring you more stories of triumph over adversity. The business card in my hand might as well have been a live grenade. Michael Jenkins, President, Sinclair Financial Group, it read. The pavilion fell completely silent except for the rain. My father snatched the card, staring at it, then at me, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally rage. What kind of joke is this? No joke, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Walter Sinclair took me under his wing after I left. When he passed last year, he left me controlling interest in the bank. Bullshit, Dale spat. But Bill Hargrove's face had gone ashen. I've been meeting with the bank board for weeks about our extension, he said slowly. They kept saying the final decision was coming from the president. His eyes widened. You're that Jenkins? A murmur rippled through the crowd. This isn't possible, my father said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. You're not even 30. I'm 24, I corrected. And it is possible because it's true. So what? You came back to gloat? Scott stepped forward, fists clenched. To tell everyone you're shutting down the mill? Putting your own father out of work? Rebecca touched my arm. Michael, is that true? The mill's closing. I looked around at the faces watching me, family members, neighbors, people I'd grown up with, all depending on the mill, all waiting for my answer. The mill extension was denied, I said, because the operation is unsustainable as it exists today. You little, my father lunged, but 2 cousins held him back. You come back after all this time to destroy everything? To punish me? I came back because you never gave me a chance to explain myself, I said. 6 years ago, I wanted to study engineering to help modernize places like Millfield Steel. I wanted to make things better, more efficient, not abandon the mill, but save it. But you couldn't see past your own narrow view of what makes a man worthy. So this is your revenge? Closing us down? Throwing 300 people out of work? No, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. This is... I pulled out a folded document, the proposal I'd been working on for months. This is a complete restructuring and modernization plan for Millfield Steel. New equipment, automated systems, training programs. If implemented, it would make the mill profitable again within 18 months. Bill Hargrove reached for it, but I held it back. The bank is willing to finance the entire transition, I continued, on one condition. My father's eyes narrowed. What condition? You step down as floor supervisor. Effective immediately. The gasps were audible. You son of a, that position, I pressed on, will be filled by someone with the technical education to oversee the modernization. Someone who understands both the engineering and the human elements. Someone who actually cares about saving this mill and the people who depend on it. And I suppose that's you? He sneered. No, I said. It's Rebecca. My sister's head snapped up. What? What I learned when I left, what none of you knew, was that Rebecca has been taking night classes in industrial engineering for 4 years. She's been submitting anonymized efficiency improvements to mill management that have already saved Millfield Steel thousands. She didn't tell any of you because she knew how you'd react. All eyes turned to my sister, who was staring at me in shock. How did you know? She whispered. Walter kept tabs on the whole family for me, I admitted. He showed me your proposals. They were brilliant, Becca. You were doing exactly what I dreamed of doing, but you were smart enough to do it from the inside. My father looked between us, bewildered. Rebecca? You've been going to college? Behind my back. Someone had to try to save the mill, she said quietly. And you made it pretty clear how you felt about education. I handed her the proposal. The future of Millfield Steel. If you want it. She took it with trembling hands. But I'm not finished with my degree. The bank will cover that too. Full tuition with paid leave from the mill while you complete it. The rain had stopped, but no one moved. My father stood frozen, the gold watch forgotten in his hand. His entire identity, built on being the provider, the authority, the man who knew best, was crumbling before everyone's eyes. You can't do this, he finally said, but his voice had lost its edge. You can't just walk in here and, actually I can, I interrupted. But I'm not doing this to hurt you, Dad. I'm doing it to save 300 jobs, including yours, just not the way you wanted. I turned to address the gathered crowd. The mill doesn't have to close. No one has to lose their livelihood. But things have to change. The old ways aren't working anymore. I looked back at my father. You always said Jenkins men build things with their hands. Well, I built something too, just not the way you taught me. He stared at me for a long moment, then at the watch in his palm. 40 years reduced to a trinket and a choice. Accept change or lose everything. I didn't wait for his answer. I'd said what I came to say. As I walked toward the exit, whispers and stares followed me. Some hostile, some impressed, all stunned. Rebecca caught up to me at my car. Why me? She asked. Why not take over yourself? Because I found my own path, I said. And it's time you had the chance to find yours. I drove away from Lake Cresswell that day uncertain if I'd ever be welcome at another Jenkins family reunion. But for the first time since I'd left, I didn't care about their approval. I had finally become what my father never could. A man who built a future, not just with his hands, but with his mind. The aftermath of the reunion was nuclear. My phone exploded with texts and calls, some outraged, some desperate. I answered none except Rebecca's. Dad smashed his watch. She told me 3 days later when we met at a diner just outside Millfield. Threw it against the wall when we got home. And the proposal? I asked, stirring my coffee. Bill Hargrove can't stop talking about it. He wants to implement it immediately. She looked down at her hands. But Dad still thinks it's a betrayal? She nodded. Scott and Dale are with him. They're talking about fighting it, maybe even a lawsuit to block the restructuring. On what grounds? They'll find something. Emotional distress. Conflict of interest. They've already been to 3 lawyers. I wasn't worried about legal challenges. Walter had taught me to document everything meticulously, and the bank's decision was defensible on purely financial grounds. What concerned me was Rebecca. Are you having second thoughts? I asked. No, she said firmly. I want this chance. But I don't want to destroy our family in the process. The family was broken long before I came back, I reminded her. We were interrupted by the arrival of Walter's lawyer, James Kessler, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who'd been more father to me than my own in recent years. There's something you should know, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Something Walter kept from you. Inside was a stack of financial records dating back 20 years. Loan applications, payment schedules, and forbearance agreements, all for Jenkins family mortgages. "I don't understand," I said, flipping through the papers. "Your father's been underwater for decades," James explained. "During the 08 crash, he nearly lost everything. The mill cut wages by 30%, but the mortgages didn't change." "So how did they keep the house?" "Walter," Rebecca whispered, seeing the same patterns I did. "These are loan modifications. Interest reductions. Payment deferrals." James nodded. "Walter kept your family afloat through 3 recessions. Said he owed it to your grandfather. Apparently they served together in Korea." The revelation staggered me. All those years of my father's proud declarations about Jenkins' men never taking handouts, never needing help. "Dad has no idea, does he?" Rebecca asked. "Not the extent of it," James confirmed. "Walter made sure the arrangements were handled discreetly. Your father thought he was getting standard hardship terms available to any customer." I leaned back, processing this new reality. "So the bank, my bank, has been subsidizing my family for 20 years. Walter believed in Millfield," James said simply. "And apparently in the Jenkins family even after you left." The next revelation came a week later when Bill Hargrove requested a meeting at the bank. He arrived with a folder of his own mill inspection reports dating back 5 years. "Your sister's proposals didn't just improve efficiency," he explained, spreading the documents across my desk. "They identified critical safety issues your father had been ignoring." The reports detailed worn machinery, substandard safety protocols, and maintenance deferrals that could have resulted in catastrophic failures. Rebecca had documented everything and proposed solutions that the senior management had implemented without my father's knowledge. "We've been working around Fred for years," Bill admitted. "He's respected, but—" He hesitated. "Stuck in the past," I finished. "Exactly. The world changed, but Fred Jenkins didn't." He looked at me directly. "Your sister's been saving that mill piece by piece. And now you're offering the resources to finish what she started." I had returned to Millfield seeking justice, maybe even revenge. Instead, I was discovering a more complicated truth. My father's world had been collapsing around him long before I re-entered it. His rigid pride was the only thing he had left. The confrontation finally came on a Tuesday evening when my father showed up at my temporary office at the bank. He wasn't alone. Scott and Dale flanked him like bodyguards. "Come to see where the decisions are made?" I asked, not rising from my chair. "Came to see my son," he replied. The words, so simple, caught me off guard. "The one who thinks he knows what's best for everyone." "Just for the bank's investments?" I corrected. "The mill restructuring is sound business." "And pushing out your own father? Is that sound business too?" I slid Walter's folder across the desk. "Take a look. See what your old friend Walter Sinclair thought of the Jenkins family." My father's expression changed as he scanned the documents. Scott peered over his shoulder, his face reddening. "We never needed charity," my father muttered, but the fight was draining from his voice. "It wasn't charity," I said. "It was community. The thing you taught us to value above all else, even while you were pushing me away." Dale looked confused. "What's happening? What are those papers?" "Evidence that Dad's not as self-sufficient as he claims," Scott snapped. "That the great Fred Jenkins has been getting special treatment for years." My father sat heavily in the chair opposite my desk. "Walter never said a word." "Because he respected you," I said. "The way I wanted you to respect me." The silence that followed felt different from any we'd shared before. Less hostile, more contemplative. Finally, my father looked up. "You really think Rebecca can save the mill?" "I know she can. With the right support." Another long pause. "And what happens to me?" "That depends on you," I said. "The bank is offering you early retirement with full pension, or a transition to training and safety oversight. Your experience is valuable, just not in the role you've been clinging to." 3 weeks later, I attended my first mill staff meeting. Rebecca sat at the head of the table, presenting the first phase of modernization to a room of skeptical foremen. My father sat silently at the far end, neither supporting nor undermining her. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. But it was something none of us had imagined possible. A new beginning. The mill transformation began slowly. Some veteran workers quit rather than adapt to new technologies. Others surprised everyone, including themselves, by excelling in training programs. Throughout it all, Rebecca emerged as exactly the leader Millfield needed, technically savvy but deeply connected to the community. My father chose the safety oversight role, grudgingly at first, then with increasing engagement. His decades of floor experience proved invaluable in identifying potential hazards that engineers fresh out of college might miss. 6 months after the reunion, Rebecca invited me to Sunday dinner at the family home. Scott was there with his wife and children. Dale came late, still uncomfortable with the new family dynamic but making an effort. My father, gray hair now completely white, watched me from his chair with an expression I couldn't quite read. The quarterly numbers came in. Rebecca announced over dessert. We're ahead of projections. The mill might reach profitability before the 18-month target. Michael's plan is working, my father said quietly, surprising everyone. And Rebecca's implementation is better than any consultant could have managed. It wasn't an apology. Fred Jenkins didn't apologize. But it was acknowledgement, and from him, that meant everything. Later, as I was leaving, he walked me to my car. Walter saw something in you, he said, staring at the ground. Something I missed. He saw the same thing in you once, I replied. A man worth investing in. My father nodded slowly. I still don't understand half of what you and Rebecca talk about with those systems and efficiencies. But I understand results. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the gold watch, repaired, the glass face replaced. I want you to have this. Dad, I can't. Not as a gift, he interrupted. As a reminder. 40 years I spent doing things one way. Don't make the same mistake. As I drove away from the house that night, the watch heavy in my pocket, I realized that the triumph I'd sought wasn't in humiliating my father. It was in transforming what he'd built into something sustainable, something that could support the community long after both of us were gone. Walter Sinclair had understood that all along. He hadn't just been preparing me to run a bank. He'd been preparing me to return home. A year and a half has passed since that rainy day at Lake Cresswell when I revealed my identity as the bank president. Millfield Steel celebrated its full modernization last month with a town-wide festival. The workforce is smaller, 220 employees instead of 300, but wages are higher, conditions safer, and the future secure in ways it hasn't been for decades. My father still walks the floor 3 days a week in his safety oversight role. I catch him sometimes watching Rebecca with something like wonder as she navigates between technical discussions with engineers and easy conversations with lifelong mill workers. She's managed to bridge worlds in ways I never could. As for me, I've found an unexpected balance. I still run Sinclair Financial Group, but I've opened a satellite office in Millfield. 3 days a week I work from here, investing in local businesses, creating the financial infrastructure needed for a town in transition. Sunday dinners have become a regular occurrence. Scott's oldest son just started community college, the first in that branch of the family to pursue higher education. Dale remains the most skeptical of the new Jenkins way, but even he recently enrolled in a management certificate program. Last week, my father and I went fishing at Lake Cresswell, something we hadn't done since I was 12. We didn't talk much. Jenkins' men never mastered that art. But as the sun set over the water, he said something I'll never forget. I wanted to protect you, he said, eyes fixed on his fishing line. The mill was the only security I knew. College, moving away, I thought those things meant losing you to a world where I couldn't help if things went wrong. I know, I said, because finally I did understand. His limitations hadn't come from malice but from fear. The fear of a man who had seen factories close, jobs disappear, and communities collapse. Your mother would be proud, he added, of both of you. In the end, the secret Walter Sinclair had understood, and had tried to teach me, was that true power isn't about control or revenge. It's about creating possibilities where none existed before. Sometimes that means challenging the systems we inherit. Sometimes it means modernizing traditions rather than abandoning them. I came back to Millfield thinking I knew exactly what success looked like, watching my father acknowledge his mistakes and admit my worth. What I found instead was something far more valuable, a chance to heal not just my relationship with my family, but an entire community's relationship with its future. The watch my father gave me sits on my desk now. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that time changes everything, even the things we believe are fixed and immutable. Even family. Even us. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that sometimes you have to leave home to find the tools to save it. Sometimes the greatest act of love for your roots is challenging what they've always been, to help them become what they could be. Whatever your Millfield is, whatever family expectations or small-town limitations you're facing, remember that defying them doesn't have to mean destroying them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is come back, bringing everything you've learned with you. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Your comments mean the world to me. Let me know if you've ever had to leave something behind to save it later. Until next time, this is Michael Jenkins, reminding you that sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most important beginnings.